All righty. Shit my dad taught me.
Ready to go.
We are ready to go. We have a VIP in the studio today. Lance Slack. I want to start by introducing you, Lance, if I can.
Of course.
Lance is a great friend of mine. Easily one of my favorite people in the world. And I think you're going to find out why over the next, whatever we end up talking for, a couple hours, let's say. Lance has a very diverse background he's going to tell you guys about. He is one of my favorite dads, just to talk dad with. And you're going to hear why as well today, too. And then on a professional background, I know we always start this with the good old ChatGPT. So ChatGPT would say, Lance Lack is the founder of Second Street, a software development company based in Burlington, Ontario. Lance's expertise in software development and his leadership at Second Street make him a valuable resource for insights into the software industry and how that might apply to your company. As that goes on to say, he also partners with other software companies. And that's the professional side. And then it goes on to say, Lance is the father of 2 children. And we're going to talk about Logan and Cam today as well, too. How'd ChatGPT do?
Not bad. I mean, it missed out on a whole section of my life, but it's a good start.
He forgot, likes warm walks on the beach.
Yeah.
There is a whole section on romance with Lance.
Lance romance.
Lance romance.
Well, that's a first. Is that a brand new thing someone came up with? Lance romance just now on this? That's amazing.
You've never heard? No.
It must be ChatGPT.
Is that your wrestling name?
He's very smooth. So Lance, tell the folks about yourself. Did we get it all? Did we capture everything?
You got a few things. Yes, I am a father of 2 beautiful children. They're older now, and I'm finding myself having a lot more free time. Otherwise, I probably could never have afforded the time to do this podcast.
Empty nester or not empty nester?
Not quite yet. I have a second life. I have a little bit of a double agent life. I live with my girlfriend half of the time, and she has 2 kids as well, 15 and 12. And so I go back and forth between the 2 houses, and sometimes it's a little weird when I'm at the one house and there's this whole other life waiting for me a couple of days away, and vice versa. When I'm at the one house, I miss my kids. When I'm at my house, I miss her kids and her as well. It's an unusual way to live, but lots of love all the way around. So it's pretty interesting. Professionally, I also have a full-time job that I do for a software company in the States, remote work. And Second Street is a secondary business that helps keep me busy in my downtime. And then, of course, the Storyay thing, which we can talk about later.
I'm so excited. Go back to when you were a kiddo. Did you read a lot? What was your childhood like?
My mom was an interesting person. She read full-time. When she wasn't working 16 hours a day, because I was the 4th kid in a welfare family. So
Fourth kid.
4th kid.
Nice.
There were 5, but one was stillborns. But so I was the 4th kid in a welfare family. So I got to wear my sister's hand-me-down clothes and get their hand-me-down haircuts. I had this long feathering hair. It was beautiful.
Where did that go?
It's still there. It's just receded into my head now.
2 kids and 2 stepkids. That's where it went.
Yeah, real quick.
And I was blonde. I was bleach blonde. I have a picture when I was 10. It was beautiful hair. Oh, well.
Blondes have more fun?
I think so. So she worked a lot, and the rest of the time she was reading. She wasn't a person who watched TV. She just had a chair, and she would pick up books at yard sale, whatever cheap things she could find, and she would just read everything. And it was interesting. I knew that she was a good reader, but not somebody who had grown up with other people who were readers, because there were 50 words that she mispronounced all the time.
And so single mom growing up?
Single mom. When I was 1, we moved from New Brunswick, sorry. I was born on a little island called Graham and Anne, and she put the 4 of us on a ferry in a car and drove to New Brunswick. 4 kids. Can you imagine? Drove to Ontario, 4 kids. And when we got there, we just kind of found a place to live, and I was 1, and my next oldest was 4, and the next one was 5, and the next one was 9 years old. So 4 kids, 9 to 1. That's a lot. She just
Just her?
Yeah, just her. My father, who I never really knew, he didn't want her to work, and she wanted to work, and there was an impasse. And so she said, "Fine, I'm taking the kids, and we're going away." And I was her only kid by that father. The 3 previous kids were another dad that had drowned as a fisherman at sea, probably drinking. Yeah. But again, I never knew my father. We moved away. I was supposed to go and visit him in the summers, but the story that I'm told is, and he's passed now, a couple of years back. The story I was told of is that he couldn't handle the thought of giving me up again at the end of a summer. I was supposed to go out and visit him in summers, kind of hang out with him once I got a little older, but he couldn't handle the idea of giving me back. I'm like, well, as an adult now, too bad. Suck it up, Buttercup. Like, take me for a month, cry your heart out for a month, give me back, but have the experience, right? I don't know how he could choose to not be in a kid's life. Now, I've made peace with that for myself. You know, I grew up tough. I learned how to handle things for myself. But he made that tough choice. Now, as an adult now, I know there are probably 50 things that went into that decision, right? It's not so black and white. It's not so simple, but it actually is. He made a choice to not have me in his life, and so therefore he missed out. Too bad for him.
Yeah.
That's the way I look at it.
It is a lot of people don't understand that. Like I get it totally, because my biological father left my mom when she was 5 months pregnant, and I've never met him. I know who he is. He lives in, out in the prairies. He's reached out to her over the years and said that like he would like to get to know me, but like his kids don't know about me. He's never, like, until I was like 15 or so, never reached out. I have no need or void or any spot to fill that I want to know who he is. Like,
Same.
He made the decision before I was born, and that's his decision, and I don't hold it against him, but I have no need to fill that void. So no resentment about it. Just, I don't need it.
I totally hear you. I went back to visit him sort of every 7 years over the course of my life when I was 7, 14, 21. And then I think he passed. My son was maybe 3. I'm bad with dates. And Cam was about 1, so still a baby. So my ex and I were married at the time. We went out there and went to the funeral, put him in a box and put him in the ground. But I still didn't particularly feel anything. It was more of a duty and obligation. I felt this is my biological father, who I have a tiniest bit of relationship with. So I felt some obligation, but not really. Interesting sidebar story about my father. All the way along growing up, he told me, "Oh, this piece of land and this piece of land on an island. It's a beautiful, small. There's nothing to do but have sex and make babies and drink and cocaine." Island.
Sorry, which island is this?
Yeah, where's the island?
Just for anybody listening.
We were considering moving our studio.
Yeah. So I have 2 side stories if we have time. The first one is all the way along he said, "Oh, you're going to own this land and this land. It's right on the ocean. Beautiful piece of property. It's totally overgrown and useless, but nonetheless, it's sort of cool to think, oh, I've got this property on this island to look forward to when I get older." When the funeral happened, an uncle or something, a cousin, it's unclear. I don't know the family that much.
Could be the same person.
Might be the same. Actually, there's a third side story, but anyway, we'll get to that.
Does it start with a bottle of Screech?
No, it's the cousin being related to each other thing. But this is a small island with 1,500 people.
We'll put that one in a bubble for mine.
Yeah. It's 2 people who with the same last name who were cousins, 4th removed, and married each other. They didn't even have to change names. It's an interesting little side bubble story. Anyway, so when I went to go to the funeral, this person whose name I don't even remember came over, a cousin, uncle, brother, I don't know. And he said, Glenn, that's my father's name, has left you this money, gives me this envelope with like chicken scratch on it, and it's dirty, coffee stained, and not even closed, and it's got $1,000 cash in it. And I'm like, well, that's weird, because he always told me that I would get this property. He's like, oh, no, that's going to my son. And I'm like, okay. And this is at the funeral, right? Like, didn't even wait. And I'm like, actually, I don't care, because what am I going to do with a piece of useless land way away from everywhere that I'm never going to go visit?
Hold on. Sex,
and cocaine.
drugs, cocaine.
I'm getting to that.
Alcohol. Like, what are you going to do with it?
Yeah. No, it's like all rough and overgrown, and it truly is, and rocky.
Sounds like hell.
I know. Without a lot of money, and at the time, I definitely didn't have any money. I just thought, fine, I don't care. I'll take the $1,000. I'll spend it on cocaine. I didn't. For my daughter, no, I didn't. So that was just like a weird little, thing where somebody obviously took advantage of the situation. He's like, well, we've been taking care of him, the last stages of his life. And I'm like, you know what? Frankly, I don't give a shit. Thanks for the cash. pay for my flight home.
We forged the will that he didn't have.
Probably,
Yeah.
right? Well, so he died of a heart attack and then was smoking because, as you do, and the cigarette fell out of his mouth into his highly flammable, probably alcohol-related chair, and it wiped the house out. So everything was gone.
Jesus.
So even if there was a will and it was in the house, it was gone. So at the end of the day, I'm just like, you know what? I don't want this property actually. So off you go. But it might actually have been mine. I don't know.
Hmm.
Good times. I don't remember what the second sidebar story was. We went to the third. That doesn't matter. Let's come back.
The two cousins with the same last name.
Yeah. They probably half of the island I'm sort of loosely related to in a distant cousin kind of a way, and then the other half are people that moved there to make B&Bs and live there, I guess, the rest of their life.
So your dad taught you don't fall asleep with a cigarette in your drug-infested house and booze in your couch.
Yeah. He also taught me the dangers of, even though it sounds really tempting sometimes, of being a loner, of being all by yourself and having no one to, talk to and no one to be accountable for. He lived on his own for the last, I don't know how many of his years, all of them, something like that. When he was young, he was in an incident where he accidentally shot and killed his best friend. They were out hunting together. His best friend was wearing a stupid white shirt inside of his brown jacket. Like, come on, he looked like a deer. So he got shot. RCMP came, investigated, cleared him. They came again 20 years later because the family was like, I don't believe it. They investigated again, cleared him again. But from the time he was 30, his whole life, he just kind of lived on his own.
Did he
Never
end up
had-
getting the deer? Or?
I don't think he got any deer, but he's a hunter, so I'm sure he got other deer. I don't think he can eat the humans. Probably not.
What's did you end up having any conversations, anything heartfelt, any wisdom bestowed?
I mean, the shortest answer is probably no. We'd go there, go visit him for an hour or two, and then we'd go away. And then, so that was 7-14. When I was 21, I drove there myself. Probably spent a little more time, like a couple of hours with him. But, how much do you get to know somebody in that short period of time when he knows he's feeling guilty that whole time, that whole conversation that he
But it
coulda, shoulda,
probably
woulda.
taught you more in a different balance because from your experience and the relationship you had with your dad, it probably changed how you wanted to be a father and how you wanted to better your kids that way, right?
It's funny. I was talking to my girlfriend's kid about this the other day. That all of the negative things in my life have made me a stronger, tougher, self-managed person, and it's that personality. But I remember being a little kid, like 8 years old, 9 years old, and when I'm older, when I'm a parent, not if, but I was like, I knew I was going to be a parent. When I'm a parent, when I'm older, I'm going to not move around every year. I'm going to make sure I'm there for my kids. I'm going to be involved in their activities. But more importantly, I'm also going to help them learn how to be self-sustaining people, because at the end of the day, you have only you, right? You're only responsible for yourself, accountable to yourself at the true core of it, I believe. But if you surround yourself with people that you love and that you care about, and you give your love to them, and they in turn give it back, which is great. That's like a contract of, you have an ownership, a responsibility to these people now because you've given it to them. You could walk away at any time, as my father did. And again, I don't know the circumstances. Maybe she was a one-night stand. I don't really know. It's not actually any of my business. But like, there's a responsibility once you give it. Once you say, I'm going to do this, then you have to do it. Being a person of your word is pretty important, in my opinion. And I want my kids to be that way because I have a 3 rule for my kids. I'm like, you need to be polite. You need to be not an asshole, and try as much as you can to give something back to the world. I don't care what it is. Just try and do something. Because, I mean, why else are we here? Entertainment? I don't know. That's the only other reason that I can think of, if you're not religious, that you're here on the planet in the first place, is to entertain yourself, right? I want to have something more than just entertain myself. I do entertain myself, but my forms of entertainment are, I don't know, they're a little bit in my head. I like thinking in different ways, unusual ways. I enjoy that whole aspect of thinking in unusual ways. and I foster that in my
What
kids.
kind of unusual ways are we going here?
You know, finger in the bum, that kind of stuff. No, I just I like to approach things from different perspectives. You know, the non-standard perspective, almost like put myself out of body and look at it from a different angle, even if it's not something that makes me comfortable. I like to just look at things in different ways because, in my opinion, ideas come from either my own ability to look at things from different ways, or as we talked earlier off air, the ability to take other people's perspectives and hear them and respect them. You don't have to believe them. You don't have to agree with them. You can be vehemently opposed to them, but hear and respect those people because I'm not you. You're not me. Nobody here owns anybody
Or mushrooms.
or mushrooms.
Yeah,
Mushrooms
mushrooms would be the
also
other-
would be a thing. I
yeah,
definitely
so-
have not gone down the road of mushrooms. It's a one day. It's a bucket list. Probably with my oldest son, Logan, who wants to do mushrooms.
So you're one of my favorite dads. You know, I started by saying that. So what's
Appreciate
fascinating to me is how you've become that guy without directly learning from that guy, right? Like I think most of the people that excel at something have had some kind of mentor. So do you
My
have
mom was
anybody
my
like that? Your mom. Tell me about that.
So I remember talking to you about something along these lines some time back about this podcast, about the genesis of it all. And you asked me about my dad. And I'm like, I don't know that you want to hear about my dad. And, you know, he had this thing and he had that thing. You remember I listed off a few. I mentioned the killing his best friend situation. There were some other things that are less palatable for on air that I want to leave out. But at the time, even then, I thought my mom was my dad. She was everything. Okay, I'm not putting her on a pedestal. She was not the perfect mom. How could she be? Who among us are the perfect parent? It's not possible. Two parents together can't be perfect parents. It's impossible. Two parents with aunts and uncles and brothers and sisters and helpers all the way around. It's not possible to be the perfect whatever.
And
parent.
does that perfect picture of a parent ever raise the right kid?
No,
No.
because they're still individuals and they still make their own choices
sure.
and they still take their own risks. They make their own mistakes. They fuck up things and you want them to because you want them to grow and you want them to be tough. You want to give them opportunity to fail without total and complete utter failure, right? That's the bubble parent is trying to. Yeah, it's not good for them, in my opinion. These are all just opinions. It's not good for them to be 100% safe and get everything just given to them because they're never going to know how to go and get it themselves. And I think
Helicopter
a lot of
parents.
our kids,
Nobody likes a helicopter parent.
even the next level outside of that, I think a lot of parents generally feel like their kids are not tough enough. They're not strong enough. They haven't been through enough tough times. Well, it's about to happen for them. They're like my kids are going to come out of university and be like, what the fuck do I do now? Where do I go work? How do I get a job? How do I pay for myself? Can I afford to live somewhere? I can't. So I'm very fearful for our kids the next bunch of
We're
years.
in our 40s and we're still trying to figure that out.
I don't know.
I'm going to live at Carter's house next week.
I don't know. Maybe that's why we're doing the podcast. Maybe now the difference is we got some friends and we got some time.
Like
so
wait
we're
till
trying
these
to
guys
figure it out.
that own this basement figure out that we're down here.
And if you guys could talk quieter, that would be great.
Well, I did come in through the side
Yeah.
window, like you said.
Yeah.
I closed it.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
the dark, I was here at 3 a.m. so that no one would know. I came in, but my mom was my dad. She had to do everything. There was a time when she got for me what's it called? I think it was in Kitchener and Big Brothers. So I had a big brother for a few years. I was my big brother's wingman, pretty sure. He would pick me up. We'd go down to Binghamton Park, go roller skating. He would give me $5 for video games and snacks or whatever, and $5 in I don't know, how old was I? Young.
It was like 5 hours of video
1980.
games.
That's a lot of quarters. And then I would see him off there picking up chicks. Good for him. And I don't begrudge him, right? He took me out, spent a couple hours with me. We would talk.
She showed you the ropes.
Showed me how to pick up chicks. It didn't help me anyway. This dude lived in a houseboat too. It was unbelievable, this guy's life. I mean, was he doing anything wrong? I don't think so. He got a kid when he wanted. He could borrow it, put it back, right? Go meet some chicks. I assume he scored. I don't really
Wonder
know.
where this guy is now in life.
I don't even remember his name. But
Hold on, is this his basement?
you kids shut up down there. Yeah. So, but my mom did everything. She worked 12, 16 hours a day, some of it under the table. So she'd do one job and then she'd go do another job for cash. She'd get home at 11 o'clock at night. Me and my sisters we knew she was coming. So we'd scramble our kids out of the house, all the friends that were there watching whatever in the basement that weren't supposed to be there. One of them was locked up um, in the attic for like an hour because my mom came home a little bit early, and we were all a little surprised, and for whatever reason decided to stay in the attic. But yeah, my mom kind of did everything, but she didn't have the time to do everything. So I don't know. I think because I had 3 older sisters as well, by that time I just had to. Like I was 8 years old, and I came home from school. I walked home from school for lunch, and I made myself some macaroni and cheese. I forgot to drain the water, so it was macaroni and cheese soup, and it was disgusting. But I learned real quick, right? Next time, drain the fucking water, and then you're gonna have still disgusting macaroni and cheese, but at least I can eat it, right? And I remember putting iceberg lettuce on my bologna sandwich with mustard and margarine with white bread because I thought, well, that's some vegetable. And I was 8, right? I learned young, had to. Our kids don't have those things. I don't want that for my kids. But my kids know how to cook. Maybe 2 or 3 meals each they can make. Fuck it. Now they can figure it out the rest themselves when they get older.
You still make a good macaroni and cheese, I bet. Eh?
I sell it, but now I make it for real.
And then, so fast forward. So you guys moved to Ontario. We're in Ontario still. Home is Burlington.
Mm.
What's it been like to raise kids here? And maybe go back to tell us about your first marriage, maybe.
Only marriage.
Only marriage.
Forever
and ever?
Mel and I have talked about this, and as far as I know, we have no intention of marrying. There are lots of good reasons. It's not about love. We love each other. We're as connected as you can get. Marriage is a contract, and it's not one that we feel we need. We feel connected, and everything is kind of perfect. As we go through our changes in life, like as Mel's kids go away, maybe something changes then. But we'll just talk about it again. We've talked about it. We've gone back and forth, shared our opinions. They align. Why change, right? Marriage to me now is just a formality and a contract. The commitment side of things, I'm done with that. I have one commitment. I've made it to her, and I'm stuck with Mel now. So I don't see that changing. But that to me is not the same as marriage. But that's because I've been through it, and I've been divorced, and there's financial obligations. Mel's got her own money. I've got mine. We don't feel the need to merge them. When she passes, her money goes to her kids. When mine to mine. It's just the way it'll be for now. We may change it later, but for now, no. So, first marriage. I had rebounded off of a 5-year relationship, 4 or 5 year relationship, and I just wanted to have a bit of fun. I wanted to go out and do some dating. And then I met Allison, and she was a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun. We had a lot of aligned feelings and opinions and values and enjoyment and fun. Years later, that was different. We had kids. We had hard times, financial hard times, health hard times. There were hard times. Logan was a challenge that 2 healthy parents, with a kid with autism is a challenge. We had some maybe not full healthy parents with a kid with autism, and that was a challenge, no doubt. A second kid came along with like some breathing challenges, and that was a challenge. So for many years there was just no sleep, and government got involved. There was a bankruptcy. There was some difficulties, let's just say. And at the end of the day, Allison and I knew that we were not going to be healthy, happy, and able to raise our kids the way that we wanted to if we stayed together. So we just made the split. And it was this moment where I was sitting there thinking, I don't have to have my life be difficult with respect to the marriage side of things and raise happy, healthy kids. I can do those things independently of each other. And I did. And we did. She's done her parts, and I've done my parts. And our kids they're not assholes. They hold the door for people. They're polite. They do their best. They're both trying to do something with their lives. Logan's off at university, having a hard time, but he's buckled down. He did just sign a lease for a year or 2, so he's mentally committed to going back again. He's preparing for this next term and like doubling down, and he's got plans in place to get some help. And Cam just accepted for Dalhousie University out in Halifax.
Hey, that's great.
So he's going to go out there in September. So yeah, in September, empty house, more or less. And
don't tell them about where that island is, though.
I know, the one with all the coke. And then there's another kid that's living at the house. was a friend of my son Logan's that was just fell in a hard spot. So he moved in with me for, I don't know, a year, at least 2 years. I don't know. The dates blur. But he's moving out to Calgary in March. So as of end of June, I will have no reason to be in the house I'm in, because then September Cam will go away to university, and then I'm now in this house with no people in it. So
A blessing and a curse.
yeah, it's an interesting thing. I don't think that I'm prepared. I don't think it's the smart move to just move into Mel's full time. Like, I don't think any of us are prepared for that, for lots of different reasons, habits and routines and all of that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, my kids are fucked. Hope you're watching this. They're not going to be in a position at the end of university right out of the gate, unless some magic happens, to pay for their own place, to live on their own. And so I'm going to keep my house, and they're going to always have a place to come home to, and vacations and, breaks and for the summers and things like that. But more importantly, they're going to have a place to live, to start their lives for some unforeseen amount of time, until, I don't know, they get tired of it, or they can afford to go out and live somewhere else. And if they decide, well, let's get some roommates to help pay for the mortgage or whatever, then super duper, we'll do that too.
I think that's the new way of university students. Like, I think kids are going away to school. They're coming back home. They're spending 3-4 years at home trying to figure out what they're going to do, where they're going to go. And it's not cheap. Like, when we were done university, I didn't go to university, but when most people went to university and they finished, it was like, hey, like, you needed $20,000 as a down payment on a house at that point. And,
Mm-hmm.
when you were getting married, your parents gave you like $10,000 towards it or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, kids need $250,000 as a down payment, and they still can't afford what the mortgage would be on an entry level home. So I think it's pretty normal that after university, kids are coming back home. So that's cool that you're good with that, and you're setting them up for that.
Plan for it. Yeah. And it's just evidence of, the society is sort of cyclical in what it does. Like, every 30 years, something comes back. And because if you asked somebody 30 years ago, they would have said, live with your parents as long as you can possibly manage it, because it's cheaper, and they're going to need some help anyway. And it's cheaper for you. You save up your money, bank it and all that. But when I was getting out of university, out of high school, I couldn't wait to get away from my parents, because I wanted to be my own person, make my own choices, do my own things. And that's how my mom raised me, is to be an independent self-starter, do my own thing. Whether it was intentional that she raised me that way or not, doesn't matter. It's the way I came out.
I get it. I moved out at 15, so I get it. I never
that's a
went
bit
back.
young
Well,
for
that's
me.
not true. I went back for like 3 months because I had knee surgery when I was 16 because I was being an idiot. But so I went back for
nothing's
3 months because I
changed.
couldn't walk, and then when I could walk, I left again.
Yep.
and never made it back.
Yep. I want to make sure that my kids have a decent chance at a start in life. I can't give them all the things, everything. One, because I don't think it's a good idea, and two, because I'm not financially in a position to be like, here, you get a house, and here you get another house, and here's a car, and I'll help you get a job somewhere. Like, none of those things are viable options. They're not really good for a kid anyway. But I want to give them something. They need to have something, because they can't live. No one can afford to do it on their own right now, I think. And I grew up from a place of, like, coming from a welfare family. There's no way my mom was in a position to give me much of anything. Um, it's just the reality. In fact, I think I remember at least one of my siblings telling me how they bought their dress at a Value Village for $5, and they were super excited. And I, of course, it was just like, this is a nice dress. I'm really glad you're here. Appreciate all that. But in the other side of my brain in that moment was like, you're 40 something years old, and $5 is what you can afford. And I felt a little bad, because I don't know, at a certain point in life, you want to be able to stand on your own 2 feet, and they just weren't quite there yet. And my other sister, has 2 houses and has found her path. We all go through a different journey. I don't know what my kids are going to be when they grow up. Are they going to be self-sustaining? I don't know. Let's find out. But I'm going to try and help them get there.
You don't know
Best
what
I
you're
can.
going to be when you grow up.
I'm never going to grow up. I refuse.
Tell me about that journey for your kiddos, because obviously I've looked up to you as you've navigated your challenges as a single dad, as somebody trying to help those kiddos figure out the world. So tell me about let's talk about Cam.
So Cam was born Kaylee, assigned female at birth, and a couple of years, maybe a year, again, bad with dates, I've mentioned this before, decided that they never felt quite right, and they wanted to transition to become a man. It was a bit of a shock, not because they decided to transition to become a man, but because I had felt like up to that point, whenever there was anything big, anything huge, that Cam would share with me more likely than share with his mom. So I was like, whoa, that's surprising that I didn't know. And now Cam had been talking to Logan, his older brother. See, I screwed up the pronoun. His older brother, and kind of telling him about what was going on. And so this is all just surprising to me because I didn't know, and I usually felt like I would know. I've since learned that there are other things that my kids have gone through that they didn't tell me about. And I started to wonder, well, how good of a parent am I if I've always said, I want to be there for you, I want you to be able to tell me anything, I want to hear it. And for the most part, I felt like they were, but that there were some real big things that I wasn't hearing. So I was like, it made me really just reevaluate myself as a person. Of like, you think you're some person that's a certain kind of way, and you are, but you still miss the mark a little bit. You still fail. You put in all that effort, and you still kind of fail in some degree. And fail's probably a bit harsh, but like you miss something, right? Um, but at the same time, Cam came out to me in a letter and said, can you tell mom for me? So I'm like, all right, at least I win that. It's not really about winning, but you get the idea, right? Like your emotional response at the moment is like, oh, okay, so I'm not as close, but I'm still pretty close. They came out to me. They wrote me this letter. They couldn't tell me in person. They asked me to text them when I was done reading the letter. It's interesting the way that kids communicate now. I do it too. I don't answer phone calls. I wait for a text or an email, something with context, so I know why I'm going to answer you and how to prioritize my response and all that kind of stuff.
How long ago was this? How long ago did this start?
I'm pretty bad with dates, but like a year and a half, maybe 2 years,
Okay.
something in that range. They're still quite young. They were like maybe 15. They're 17 now, 18 in October.
Okay.
Yes, that's correct. And at the time, my immediate response was, "Whoa, they're just a kid. How can they know what they want? How they're feeling? Is this real?" No, they were always like kind of girly when they were young, and I never made them feel girly. I always let them be whoever they wanted to be. You want to be more tomboyish? I don't care. Like, let's go play in the creek together. We used to make paper boats and color them with crayons so that they'd float longer, and we'd do experiments with rice, and we were up to our knees in water, and there was worms and slugs all over them. That's not girl or boy. That's just kid, right? So I always felt like that sort of surprised me when one of the things Cam said was like I never quite felt girly like the other girls. And I'm like, that's fair. I don't know that I felt boy-y like the other boys when I was young either. I don't know how I felt compared to other people. I don't think there's any real way to measure that. But so they were, young but not that young, starting to become a grown up in some respects, but also my immediate response was, oh, they're too young to make this kind of a call. I have no idea how could they make this decision. And their letter was so definitive. I am trans, right? So uh, again, Cam, if you're listening, just as my emotional response, that's all. I just felt like there's no way, you're too young. How could you know this? And I don't know that my personal opinion has changed much in that matter between now and then. What has changed, though, is we've talked way more about it. We talk not every day, but pretty regularly about what's happening. At the end of the day, the only thing that matters to me is Cam knows I love him. They know I will support him in any way, shape, or form. If we go down the road of actually doing transition, like an actual surgery, I'm gonna love him just the same. I've done my level best to always use him. For a little while, I will use they because it was an easier transition. But now I just use him, and actually, it feels fucking weird if somebody says her, including myself or she or whatever. There was this moment of like a grief, like a mourning, like my daughter is gone now. That was fucking weird. I can tell you that much because I have such wonderful memories about them when they were little and they were a girl. It's not because they were a girl. I remember them as a little girl. The Mama Daddy song and the dipping the strawberries in ketchup. Oh my God. Those are all little girl Kaylee moments. It doesn't change how I love them now or then. None of that changes, but it is difficult to kind of wrap your head around. They were a girl, but they never were a girl. They were a boy in their current opinion or current thoughts or current mindset, or I don't want to use the wrong words. I don't want to negate how Cam feels. Cam feels like he never was a girl, like he is a boy, and that he just got the wrong body. That's Cam's feeling, as I understand, right? how could I truly understand? I'm not inside his head. I don't really know, but that's how I understand and how I perceive it. My own opinion about um, how old a kid should be when they start transitioning and all of that is, as I truly have no idea. I really am undecided on it. But what matters to me is actions. Actions are more important than feelings and opinions, in my opinion. um, what I do is when Cam needs some help, I'm there to help. When Cam wants to talk to a therapist, I'm there to book the therapist. And when Cam needs to get 3 or 4 referrals to different doctors around the area, like we did a sick kids one, and there's a Hamilton one, and there's another one. Um, Whatever Cam wants to do, let's line up those appointments. Let's get that stuff. The problem is they take a year or two anyway, um, to get those approvals done. So we did one with sick kids, and they're like, oh, probably a year and a half, 2 years. I'm like, well, then Cam will age out of the program because you have to be 17 to get in the program. So now with Cam going away to university, in my opinion, there's no friggin' way Cam is getting into any program between now and the time he goes off to university. So we're gonna have to do it again. He's gonna in September go to Dalhousie, which is far from Ontario, and sign up for another program and wait another year. So like I feel like on from Cam's perspective of what he wants to do, he's getting the shaft, he's getting the runaround because it's taking too long. My personal opinion doesn't actually much matter with respect to how I go about supporting Cam. That's how I feel about that.
It's interesting. I have I've never had to go through this process, but like I have thoughts or questions from being an outsider, not understanding going through that kind of a situation. And I'm sure that
No,
we've
I'm
got
an outsider too.
a lot of people that would be like watching this and like questioning both sides of it. And there's a lot of people that are probably afraid to talk about it on your side of it. There's probably a lot of people that are afraid to question it on the other side because there's not a lot of people that can sit down and have an open conversation on two sides of a matter without it getting to be an unrealistic conversation.
Hmm.
So respectfully, like I would like to ask you a few questions for sure. Um, I I in my mind look at a teenager that like when I was 14, I was confused about a bunch of things. Lots of teenagers can think about suicide and think about other guys are getting girls and this and that, and you're confused because one, you're a teenager, two, you're going through puberty and your body's changing and hormones change. So I don't believe that you really know who you are or what you're confused about because you're a teenager, you're going through puberty. So in my mind, I can't wrap my head around how a 13 to 17-year-old should or could make that decision that they want to transition their body physically without really knowing who they are. And I'm not in their mindset. I can understand feelings about like who they love and who they're attracted to, and that I totally understand. And I don't have anything that I question about that. My question would be more like, I don't know that I could ever wrap my head around or agree that like a 13 to 17-year-old should be allowed to make that decision. And thankfully in Canada, it's very different than in 20 of the states in the US, where, if a 13-year-old in the US wants to make this decision, the parent has no choice and they can just go to their teacher, and within 3 weeks, they're getting hormones given to them. And within 12 months, they're getting a surgery booked for them. And that can be done without a parent's approval. At least in Canada, I think this is a blessing that there is a time that the time that they're properly trying to take, because in my mind, I don't think that that child, because they are still a child, can know what they really want to do to their body physically, because there's so much that goes into it. Like I don't know what kind of perspective you can kind of give to somebody on my side of it, where I'm not against the whole idea of it. I'm more against the fact that I don't think somebody that's 13 to 18 should be allowed or encouraged to make that decision. And maybe it's out of ignorance because I'm not in that position, but like I raise my kids that, you're born a boy and you're a boy, and love who you want to love, but you're a boy. So if one of my kids came to me when, they're 16 years old and said this, I don't know how would deal with it because they understand how I feel about it. And I don't think how I feel about that decision would change but I don't know how I would personally deal with that situation either, because I would want to love my kid, but I don't believe that that's the right thing to do. And I would tell my kid that, like, no, that's not right. Like, you don't want to change your body. Like, you're 15 years old. Talk to me when you're 20, 21. Live some of your life and go through some life, and better understand yourself, and maybe make that decision later. What would you say to somebody like me that's kind of in that mindset, that they're not against people that go through that transition, but maybe more against that? Hey, if you're a teenager, you shouldn't be. I don't think they should be supported in doing that.
Yeah, the first thing I would say is the fact that you care is number one, right? The fact that you're there and listening and want to help and care is number one. The second thing I'd say is I don't have a clue what I'm doing. I don't. Just like many of us, we're not trained in this. We don't actually know what we're doing. And I'm not even sure that doctors and society know necessarily what we're doing either. Like, who decided 18 was the appropriate age for a kid to become an adult and therefore make decisions about their body? I don't know. Who said 18 is the right age for us to start drinking, and now buy weed, and drive a car? But like, all these choices that you can make in life, I don't know who decided. Society decided at some point, but did we spend a lot of time thinking about if they make sense or not? Probably not. So that's one whole aspect that I'm interested in. Um, the second is for me, actions always speak louder than words. Over my course of my life, many different relationships I've been in, where you try and talk your way out of some shit, it doesn't help. What you actually do at the end of the day is what helps. And in my opinion, you're 100% entitled to your opinion, because that's how you grew up. That's how you learn. That's how you feel. That's how you are. You might change your opinion at some point, but you also might not, and that's totally fine. I don't care. You're allowed to have those. You're allowed to talk about them. If we're talking in a place of mutual respect and love as well, then cool. That's all that really matters. Um, I can say that I was personally, I'm going to say, relieved. It made my journey, and it's not my journey, it's Cam's journey, but it made my part of the total journey easier to know that they couldn't even think about the surgery until they were an adult, at which point I transfer responsibility to them, and they are fully capable function. They're a fully capable functioning adult today, in my opinion, except for 6 months difference between now and October, or 7 or 8 or 10 or whatever that is, some number of months. Cam is perfectly capable of realizing how they feel about what they want to do, and making those choices, in my opinion, today. But they're not legally allowed to until they're 18. So, with respect to, that's the surgery. Okay. On the hormone replacement side of things, I'm a little more Switzerland. I'm fuzzy on how I feel about it. Um, there's my personal opinion, and then there's what I'm willing to support Cam in. I'm willing to support Cam. If they could go and start getting hormone replacement therapy tomorrow, I'd probably be fine with that, because we're talking about 10 months, and then they're an adult, and then they could choose, how did that go? How are they feeling? Is this still how they feel? And I truly believe this is still how they feel, but I also know people do change, and especially children change their minds. I'm an adult and I still change my mind. I'm not going to become a woman or anything like that, but I change my mind all the time about how I feel about things. Usually they're smaller things, not something as big as this. But so I don't know. It's a difficult question, because number one, I just want Cam to know that he's loved and respected, and I will support him in the decisions he makes, especially now. And it's made easier by the fact that now he's 17, almost 18, almost legally able to choose it himself. There was a big argument recently where Cam wanted to live at my house full time and not at their mom's. And the major reason was, it is easier for them to have one routine rather than the back and forth routine like I have with Mel, where I go back and forth between the houses, because they're not fully adult yet. They can stay in one house. They know where they're going to be that night. They can do their homework. They can make their meals. They can start to become more of an adult, because they know in September they're going away. And yes, there's going to be res and probably a meal plan, but it starts you on that journey of, like, I'm responsible for my house and how clean I keep it, and my food, and making sure I buy toothpaste, and, like, I'm becoming an adult. And those are, like, actual physical things that you got to learn how to do on a day to day, week to week, month to month. Like they don't even know they have to do their taxes every year. My kids don't know that. They're about to find out.
Well, and that's where my head's at. We're like, when we were growing up at 18, you were a lot more of an adult and mature than most 18-year-olds nowadays. Like, I look at more 22, 23-year-olds as like when I look at when we were like 18 years
Mhm.
old, maturity wise. Maybe not smarts wise, because like there's so much technology and stuff that people are learning a lot of other stuff quicker and sooner, but maturity wise is a very different thing. So even if I feel like if any of my three boys were to come to me at the age of 20 and say it, I would still tell them or try and enforce them that they're still too young to make that big of like that is a huge life altering decision. To me, it's not like, as much as getting married is a big decision, like it's not just getting married and then deciding you want to get divorced 6 months later if it's the
Mm.
wrong decision. I would still try and push back on them a lot that like you're still too young to understand where you're at in your life, and maybe that's out of ignorance, and I accept that. I just, not being in that position, it's more of a like not understanding it. But in my mindset, I would definitely be pushing back on my boys a lot until they got older. Even though the government at 18 says, "Hey, like here's a free ticket, go do what you want," for sure. Because there's just so many other decisions that are smaller that we wouldn't let our 18-year-olds go make, that
Mm.
I don't think there's a bigger one than that. And I appreciate that you're having this conversation, because like a lot of people wouldn't and would put, somebody else's back up against the wall. So I appreciate that you're taking like an honest question.
Yeah, I'm trying my best here. Um, when you said we were more mature as 18-year-olds, as younger generations, I do believe that, but I believe, and I actually believe this quite a bit, is kids today are more empathetic than we were when we were young. This is my opinion. I think that they know how to listen to other people better than we did when we were young, and I think they know how to feel and take for a moment how those other people are feeling. I think that they know how to do that better than we do. Now, maybe that's what made them soft, the air quote soft, and maybe that's what made us hard, is we weren't taught to listen to people's feelings or even have much of a care for them. Maybe we did it sort of cursorily, but did we really sit and listen to, like for example, 10 years ago, if you had a mental health problem as an adult male, could you talk about that? Probably not so much. But now in the last bunch of years you can. It's a lot easier to do it. We have the men's capillary group here. They're doing wonderful things to allow men to be open and talk about their feelings and what sort of struggles they're going through mental health wise. Yeah.
But a 15-year-old wouldn't know the difference of that mental health talk 20 years ago or right now, because they're still too young to understand that.
No, and I agree. I think that there's a line there. I'm just saying in general, we may have had the maturity when we were young, but I think they have the empathy than when you're young. Maybe not enough to understand. That's true. I'm willing to table that one for a minute. But the other thing is when you said, with your own kids that you would want to like convince them or encourage them, or like you even said force, which I'm sure was just anyway, it doesn't matter. But I don't want to belabor that word.
Heavily pushed back.
Heavily pushed back, yeah,
Yeah.
because you strongly believe that, and that's great. I think you should tell your kids how you feel. I think you should make them understand why you feel that way and why you think they may not be able to make these decisions themselves, or maybe may not be ready to make them or whatever. But on the flip side, I think it's important, and this is just again my humble opinion. I think you have to tell your kids, "This is how I feel. I really think it's wrong." If that's what you feel, right? I really think this is wrong, and here's why. However, here I am, and I'm listening. You tell me, and I'm going to listen to you at least, and I'm going to love you. And if you go down that road, I may not agree with you, but I'm still here. Please come talk to me. Like I think at least you got to keep that door open, because if we start shutting doors, I just think we're going to end up cutting people off. That's what I think. I remember I was starting telling a story, and I had a point. When Cam wanted to move out, their mom really had a hard time because Logan previously had also decided to move out and move into my house for very similar reasons. He just wanted to have one routine, one set, one place, easy, get up, go to school. It's not which house am I at? I got to take clothes back and forth. I've got to do laundry. Oh my God, this is just too much. So Logan wanted to move in with my house, and he did it. And it was a difficult conversation because his mom felt like she was losing Logan, losing access to him, losing part of him in her life, losing him. I'm like, well, you're going to anyway, because he's going to be gone in a month to university, or 2 months or 6 months or whatever to university. Prepare now. He's going to be gone. You're going to lose him for months at a time. You're not going to see him. Barely going to talk to him. That's how it is. So Cam was actually in the same position. And I think at first Allison was like, whoa, I'm going to lose my second kid. It's happening again. I think after some time and some talking to some people, she one day said, I get it now. Cam, if you want to live at your dad's, that's great. I support you. If she'd closed that door, pretty sure Cam would have closed a different door that may never have opened again, or maybe would have taken many years to open. So I don't know. I just would counsel anybody that is saying this is exactly how I feel and there's no changing my mind. You're allowed to feel that way. You're allowed to never change your mind. That's fine. I totally agree with that, because it's your feeling, your opinion. It's how you feel. But if you want this kid in your life, you got to keep the door open in some fashion. You get to control how you keep the door open. I don't know what that is for you. It's different for everyone, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
It is.
For sure.
Do you want them in your life?
Well, and as a
Or not?
parent, in my mind, I'm supposed to try and help teach them and push them along the way of what I believe is what right and wrong, and what I believe is, what I've been taught is, what is the difference between, like, when you're born, are you born a male or a female? Yes, you're born a male or a female. Who you love through your life is a very different thing. And I totally understand and support that. What they can't get back when they go through that transition is, like, you were born a man or you were born a female, and you go through that transition. There's no real way to go back afterwards. There are ways to try and transition back, but you're never truly back to where you started,
Sure.
right?
But if the kid has never wanted to be there, like, let's say for a second we can zoom forward 20 years in Cam's life, and somehow somebody said you made the right decision. Somehow it's just like it's proven that they made the right decision. Then imagine those years of, like, what if I hadn't, or what if I didn't? It's the reverse grief, or the reverse regret of not having done that thing. I know it's complicated.
But on the flip,
Trust
there's a
me.
ton of stories of people that
Yep.
have gone through that transition, and then the kid
And
is
regretted
20
it.
years old and they regret that they went through it, and they hold it against society and their parents. And I should never have been told that this was okay. So that's where, in my beliefs, I'm like, I want to be that parent that in my mind is pushing them to make the decision I believe is the right decision, because I don't want them to hold it against me for letting them make a decision that was wrong for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Right.
a choice. I don't know what the right answer is.
Right.
It's tough. The whole thing is a mess. It's all tough.
Yeah.
I wish.
Our point, at least to everybody, is like, you should be able to talk about it.
Well, yeah.
And there are respectful ways to talk about both sides of it.
Yep.
And that's the biggest thing, for sure, right?
Yeah, I want Cam to feel comfortable in his own body and feel the way that he wants to feel. And the fact that he doesn't, one way or another, I'm going to support helping him. If it's just listening, if it's talking, if it's, helping pay for things, whatever. At the end of the day, though, you're right. Listening is the point that I'm trying to get across, is really hear that kid, that empathy thing that I believe younger kids tend to have that we maybe didn't have when we were young. Side story. Chad H. went to high school with him. Back in the day, we would pick on kids if they were a little gay, a little weird, a little whatever, flamboyant. Chad was flamboyant. He was gay. He seemed gay back then as a kid. And we all kind of made fun of him. Now, even at the time, I'm like, I don't even know why I'm making fun of this kid. I guess because we're all doing it. Haha, must be funny. It's like when you pick on a kid for being too short or whatever. Never heard of that one. I'm a little short, in case my listening audience can't tell from how low I'm sitting on the microphone.
And that's with a booster seat.
That's with the booster seat and pumped shoes, the whole thing. But we picked on Chad H, all of us. And all of my friends since have expressed regret about the fact that we did that. No, I've never called up Chad H and said, hey, buddy, I'm sorry. We all called you a gay lord and all these other bad words that I would never use today intentionally towards a person. But I was a child, and did I know any better? Probably. Did it stop me? No, not really. But I still think about the poor Chad H today. Is he out there happy? I friggin' hope so. But back in those days, we just made fun of him. Now, today, there are kids that will make fun of gay kids. 100%. They're still there. They're still bullies. But on the whole, didn't mean that. most kids, I think, understand, or at least don't really care, or more empathetic, or more, I don't know, accepting, maybe. That's what it feels like to me. Whether that's true, I don't know. I'm not in high school. I just hear what my girlfriend's kids say, what my kids say, and I just generally, maybe it's the hopeful pragmatist side of me that the world improves in some fashion, even though it's going to shit.
Yeah. I think I would even argue that I don't believe kids are as empathetic nowadays as they were then, because with empathy comes respect. And I believe the majority of kids are less respectful than they were when we were brought up as kids.
Yeah, okay.
Because I believe a lot of parents are way more hands off, which is part of society. Like people have to work more hours.
Hmm.
Both parents are working. There used to be a parent that stayed at home that was able to help teach respect. So um, I understand your point, but I personally would also argue that like I don't believe kids are as empathetic as a whole as they were before, because I don't believe they have the respect overall as they now. My damn kids better have respect, and they better not be picking on kids at school. But I think as a whole, it's I think it's changed that way too. Yeah, sadly.
Interesting. Bullying's bad, okay?
Yeah. And now, like we've all been like you were one of the guys that was bullying. Like I got bullied my entire high school. I grew up in like I was one of the poorest kids in my elementary school. I got kicked out of 3 elementary schools. I got suspended in grade 1. I got expelled in grade 1. Um, I got dragged out of high school almost like every third or fourth day, forced to fight people. Because I was the small kid, I was the broke kid. Thankfully, after like the second or third fight, I didn't lose a fight the rest of high school, but I got dragged out because of that more and more. And I moved out when I was 15. So when I was 15 and I moved out, it's not like I moved into my own apartment. Like I moved into a place that there was drugs being sold out of all the time, and my clothes were getting stolen. I'd take everything with me when I went to high school, and when I went to work after school, like I'd have everything in my car, so I couldn't leave anything there. So I believe going through that stuff. Not that I'm saying like I
Yeah.
empower
You don't want
bullying,
your kids to learn that
but
way.
I do believe that it made me stronger. And I look at the 2 or 3 guys that I was in the same like phys ed class in high school, and the same grade 9 and 10 classes. The same 2 or 3 guys that we got picked on by all like the elite jocks in our school, and the guys that were like the super popular ones. I look back and I'm like, those are the 2 or 3. Other than there's a handful of 5 or 6 guys that made the NHL, and they really did well. And those were the really nice jocks in high school. They weren't the assholes that were bullying and picking on us. Those are the guys that made it, and they made it for the right reasons. The guys that thought they were going to be those guys and didn't make it are divorced 3 times, broke, don't have good jobs. The 3 of us that got picked on are 3 of the most successful, other than the guys that made the NHL. So I look back on it and I'm like, I don't regret the life that I went through because of it, because the bullying, I think, and everything that we went through, it made me stronger. So I don't believe that bullying is the right thing either, but I do believe it did make us who we were, being bullied a little bit. But now bullying's changed a lot too. Like, you know, when we got dragged out of high school and you got thrown into a fight, you weren't worrying about getting stabbed or shot.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was, you know, you were fists, and maybe the odd guy had a lighter in his fist, and that's what it was.
Yeah.
And you weren't worried about not making it home.
Yeah, or chased online.
For sure. And there was
incessantly
no
for hours.
Facebook and stuff like that until halfway through our high school, right? Where now you worry about your 10-year-old being bullied online, and you know, and if you've got a daughter, like you hear about all these horror stories where like young girls are like committing suicide and stuff. And you know, that's not so much happening with like young boys. Usually the boys are like 13, 14 when you start hearing those kind of horror stories. But with girls, like you hear the bullying online is absolutely bonkers. Like it's to a whole different level nowadays, for sure.
It is.
So again, that's where I believe that our kids nowadays aren't as empathetic and as respectful, because like they're doing way worse bullying than we were ever doing when we were in high school and elementary school.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, maybe it's just my wishful thinking.
Maybe it's just because you're a great dad and your kids are empathetic. You know what I mean? So you've done a great job, obviously.
Well, I try not to judge it based on my kids, but anyway, I think we can put that one to bed.
And Cotter's daughters. He's got the sweetest 2 daughters in the entire world.
My daughters, you know, much like what Lance said, I mean, kindness is a non-negotiable in our house. That's anybody can be kind. And thankfully I've I've been able to have the time around my kids to make sure that is the way they are. And, um, just because, again, I mean, I've, in my career, I've done a decade of volunteerism at a youth center, and that youth center, during my time there, grew from helping a couple dozen kids a year to helping hundreds of kids a year. My last year when I was there as chairman, we got up to 430 kids in a calendar year, free mental health services. And specifically, we dealt with, kids who were at risk, kids who had real rocky home lives, didn't get some of the breaks that other kids did.
Hmm.
And we would deal with bullying. That was a theme that I saw time and time again. And the damage that bullying can do is in some cases it's actually irreparable. And that's heartbreaking because, my stance on some of the things we've been talking about today, which great conversations, by the way. I just, I know from my perspective what kids, young adults, teens are going through, and they've got the world on their shoulders, and the pressures of such unprecedented 24/7 unrelenting pressure because of social media and because of how connected everybody is. So where it did used to be, maybe it's a schoolyard dust up, and that's tough going through that, no doubt. But now that fight is being videotaped from 20 different angles, and then it's being analyzed by the internet. That's unrelenting for that child,
Hmm.
right? So it's such a tough thing to do. And then when you layer on the complexity of trying to figure out who you are and who you want to be, that's a lot, man. So my perspective on this is I just try and be an ally. I try and be a friend. I try and listen, because I know we all know as dads how hard it is. So I think having these conversations, if I'm listening to this at home, I'd be thinking to myself, okay, number one, it's okay to have opposing views. Let's just agree on that.
Hmm.
It is absolutely okay to talk about it, whatever it is. It could be a stance on something. It could be an opinion. It could be something you're going through. Like the talking piece is so important, which, again, is why we're trying to do this, because none of us are claiming to be of a higher education or have the credentials to try and help these kiddos successfully navigate the world. But we as men, we can have conversations that hopefully make it a little more accessible for our kiddos to learn who they are and navigate that. Because there's lots. Like, I go back to when I was at the youth center, and we had a program entirely dedicated to kids who are on the spectrum, like kids who are autistic. And what we saw from that was there were so many ways that if you gave a child an environment where you knew they could succeed through peer group, through cognitive, through therapy, we just watch these kids take off. And I know, not to switch gears too much, but I know that's something that you've had in your family, and maybe you can talk to us about Logan.
Sure. I mean, straight up, Logan was a challenge when he was young. I remember this moment. Uh, he learned sign language really young. He learned more and please, and I have these distinct memories of him and how he actually did the sign language. And he was quite young, 6 months kind of neighborhood. I'm not even sure that's possible, but he was quite young when he was starting to speak, and that actually sort of helped him deal with his frustration, but also increased his frustration because he couldn't articulate what the problem was because he's a little kid. And so I remember him being, maybe a year and a half old or something, and we were like, no, we're going to the mall. We have to go to the mall to do something, get some drugs. I don't know, buy clothing for a birthday. There was some reason where that was the day. It was Saturday. We had to go, and he didn't want to go. So end of the day, we bundled him up and put him in the car seat anyway, and over we went. And he was turning really red, and he was flapping his arms around and really just grunting and making noises and stuff. Not part of the normal day to day thing. Mostly he was quiet, in his young autism, but he would get angry. And we were like, "What's wrong, buddy? Why don't you want to go? Why do it?" And he finally just shouted really loudly, "I'm angry!" And we actually pulled over the car and got out of the car and applauded him and said, "Good for you. Thank you for telling us that you're angry." Because before, it would just be, he was angry. He would go selective mute. He would just not talk about whatever the problem was. So that was actually a breakthrough that he screamed at us in this car. And if you think of that as a parent, you're like, what the hell? You're happy your kid is screaming at you? Well, yeah, because he's starting the path of communicating, which he wasn't doing before. I'm not saying he didn't talk before. He talked when he was calm, when everything was okay. But the second something got to him too much, too strong, whether it's like the tag on his shirt or the cuffs on his sleeves, or it's a little bit too tight, or it's too big and too small at the same time somehow, which is like the miracle of autism, that your shirt can be too big and too small. I only know too small. And then I buy extra large and then it's too big. But anyway, so we had this wonderful moment. And from that point forward, we made progress on the ability to talk with each other. And it was still a lot of yelling. It was still a lot of selective mute, but that was a step. And we're like, great, we did this first step. We did a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy stuff, ABA. We did all these other kinds of things. We did tons of therapy over the course of his lifetime. And he was always, we spent so much money on it. We'd sign him up for this thing, and then he'd go, and 2 seconds in, he's like, I'm done. And there was no like convincing. There was no, he was done. He was done, or he was going to flop around on the ground and scream and punch people and be angry and like run out into the street and be gone. Like it was just, yeah. So it was a tough time. But, through patience and perseverance and training and therapy and coaching and practicing and talking and listening and learning and putting my own opinions aside and like listening to experts such as they were, even an expert, you get this expert and that expert, and they're different. One's better, one's worse, or this one is better in some areas and this one's better in other areas. And then they counter, they cross each other in other areas. It was all very complicated. You never knew what was the answer. There was no answer. But then one day we paid for this test. He spent 3 days or something like that doing this test. It was exhausting. We stayed at a hotel and it was exhausting. But at the end of it, they said, well, he's 99.9% intelligence and all these other things. He's 70% cognitive functioning, so therefore that counts as a disability because he should be like in the 99th percentile of intelligence or whatever, but he's in the 70th for this. So because of the disparity, that means this is a disability. And at the end of much of this, they said, oh, he's autism. They spent 45 minutes to us explaining who Logan was. And the whole time I'm like, holy shit, that's exactly him. They explained this and that and that and that and that. And I'm like, I don't know how I couldn't have articulated that before. And now that I've been through it, I can. And I can spot autistic kids pretty easily, but usually. But I knew nothing. And then I knew a whole bunch of stuff and I still know nothing. But he was always sort of like 3 or 4 years behind the other kids on the social and emotional regulation side of things. Even today, he's 20, but he's like he's a 16-year-old in some ways. Right? When he got the ability to go off, and every kid's the same, he got to go and just drink and smoke weed because he's off in university by himself. He probably did too much of that. And then he realized it was shitty and it was harmful for himself. And then he pulled way back, and now he does way less of it, and it's a more reasonable amount. How could he have learned that if I was there over his shoulder telling him, don't drink, don't do this and that? He would never have learned. So I don't know. You got to let your kids fail a little bit.
How hard was that, letting them go to university in the back of your mind going, man, I don't want to let my hands off you. I want to help be able to coach you and guide you.
Chris can tell you that the first 4 months of Logan off at university, and this is where, Chris, you're also a great dad, not just to your own kids, but to everybody's damn kids. I would go and talk to Chris and say, Logan's having this problem. He's having this problem. He's like, hey, progress before perfection. Tell him it's okay. Tell him that he needs to buckle down and work on this thing, but it's okay if he fails because all of this is just learning. Whether it's learning what you're learning in university, or learning how to be a person, or learning how to be an adult, or learning how to be a man, or learning how to fail and be okay with that and pick yourself back up and go again. It's all just learning. And you have this great safety net. Worst case, you come home, and you make a new plan, and you start and you do something else. So Chris was able to articulate that in a way that not only did I understand it, but Logan did as well. So Chris, I owe you. I know I don't owe you because we're friends, and it's all given freely, and it forever will be. But I still kind of owe you a little bit.
Not a thing, dude.
I know.
I have so much love for you, so much love for your kids, and just having a forum where we get to talk about it and share that with people. Like, one of my favorite things that you replayed, but I say to so many young people, is just like progress over perfection. Like that's it, right? Just do a little bit more and take some risk too, right?
Hmm.
Because nobody does it perfectly ever. And the expectation to do it perfectly the first time around is just wildly unrealistic. And I think, back to Jamie's question about how hard was that. I mean, I watched that, as a guy a little bit removed. I got the bird's eye view of that, and you can see that, right? Because we as men, and specifically Lance as a father, was such a protector, and because of the fact that you knew that he was, in your words, a couple years behind socially or whatever, you knew that you were his check and balance and his safety net and his confidant in so many things I've watched you guys talk about. When they leave the nest like that, that's huge. I mean, I saw it on you. Like I watched you go from uh, excited about it to being in it and going like, oh shit,
Hmm.
like my guy is out there
Hmm.
and it's real. Um, Not easy.
And then there's another one in September, and the two
Yeah.
of them were going to be out there. One of them even farther away.
Were you checking in like every day after school, or like how
No, and I'll tell you why.
you
His
just
mom
you,
was.
you just cut the leash and like let him do his thing? And
His mom was pestering him regularly, all the time. He would get multiple texts from her, and he didn't need more, So I would check in at a reasonable amount of time, less often. As much as I wanted the information every 5 seconds, I would think back to and again, this is back in my day, when I left university. I don't think I heard from my parents in 4 months. I never heard from them once. I didn't reach out either, but there's no internet, there was no texting,
it
there was
was
no
different.
email. You phone or you show up. Those are the choices. And I didn't want to be at home. I wanted to be away on my own, doing my own thing. So it's different. And Logan wanted all that too. He wants to grow and be able to handle these things himself. But he also knows it's daunting, and he has the benefit of me telling him, one day you're going to be on your own, and maybe you'll have kids, and maybe you'll have a house, and maybe you'll buy a car, and maybe you'll pay insurance, and maybe you'll pay taxes, and maybe you'll pay this bill, and maybe you'll pay that bill. And it gets a little overwhelming when you tell him about the reality of all of it, right? The reality of being an adult can be overwhelming. There's no doubt. We have all these little systems in place that help us manage them. But at the end of the day, any one of us could break down at any minute, and we all need a little help. And thankfully, we have a nice little community here we can reach out to and get that help. And my kids have me as a community, and he's made 4 friends, and he's buddies with them all. One's going back to Australia because he was an exchange student, but like he's made friends. They just signed a lease that they're going to have a house. They're going to live together, and damn, they're going to learn how to like cook and clean and take the garbage out and yell at each other when they don't pick up their mess, because everybody's got a different level of tolerance of tidiness. Like there's so much more that he's got to learn on the social side of things, and he's going to go through that next year.
You're just trusting the process.
Yeah, and you know why?
Good for you.
Where my rules were, be polite, don't be an asshole, and try and do something. Try and make it a little better. So with those sort of edicts in mind, Logan's the kind of kid that we'd go to the mall and we'd be stuck at the damn entrance for 15 minutes because he'd be holding the door for the next guy and the next guy and the next guy and the next guy and the next guy, and he didn't know how to hand it off and be done. Like, that's enough. You've held the door for
He didn't want to
15
be
people.
rude to somebody.
So he'd be standing there just with his arm out holding the door, and after a while you could even see his own face of like, ugh, when's this going to be over? But there were people coming, and he couldn't let the door go, and he just couldn't fathom the idea that you just hand it off to the next person and let them take it over. That's just the way it was. But it came from a place of like, I want to help. I want to be polite. I want our world to be a nice place. We should all be polite to each other. So he's going to be fine. And okay, so a 16-year-old thrust into the world, they can make their way. Yeah, they're going to struggle for sure, but they can make their way. So if he's a 20-year-old feeling like a 16-year-old in some ways, but feeling like a 40-year-old in other ways, the average, he'll be fine. And he has me. He texts me. He tells me things. He asks me things that, and different things too, that he might not have done before when we were in the same house together or in the same room together, because he knows now and appreciates more having those people in his life. And, how can you learn that unless you go away a little bit on your own? And worst case, just shut the door, Call me, and I'll be there in an hour. And he knows. Cam, Dalhousie, I'll be there in 3 hours or 5, as I find an airport that can take me.
Sounds like you've done a great job, buddy.
Well, I hope so. And one day I'm not going to be here, and they're going to be out there doing their thing. Just want them to be happy at the end of the day.
When that happens and somebody says, "Tell me about your dad," what do you hope they say?
That guy? Well, I think they will tell me that they'll tell that person that I'm corny, that I do think in unusual ways on a regular basis, like as a routine. I make them think in different ways, whether they like it or not. I think they know I'll be there for them. I think they know that I care for them and will always help them as much as I can, even if that help is suck it up, buttercup. Like, figure it out for yourself. Try and fail, and it's okay to fail, because when you do, here I am. I'll help you out. And if you don't fail, good for you. You're still learning. That's Chris's words. It's still learning.
So I was thinking more about Logan, and I was thinking more about when you guys first started to see that there were things that were a little different when he was a little guy. And then you told us you obviously went and got some help and tried to figure it out. What was going through your mind before you went there, after you found out?
Well, the first thing was, it seemed like he was a little adult trapped in a tiny body that couldn't communicate. That's what I felt at all times with him. He just seemed like that dude knows some shit that he can't get out. And I felt really bad for him. I'm like, there's a human in there that somehow his brain is working differently than somebody else. And I didn't know what autism was, not really. Like, maybe heard of it a little bit. This is 20 years ago. So the prevalence of autism was quite low, at least in terms of diagnoses, whatever. Close enough. So, you generally hear about it, but you don't know what it is. And so the first thing was, okay, well, I know I'm a weird motherfucker. I don't know if I can say that or not, but I did. And I know I was different than or at least I felt I was different than other kids when I grew up. But we moved every year, and I just sort of put it down to that. Like, I moved every year. I would find the biggest bully on this playground. I'd find you, and I would go and I'd stand up to you, and then you'd knock me down, and I'd kind of chuckle a little bit, and then you'd laugh, and then you'd pick me up, and we'd be best buddies forever. And then I was set. That was like my move. Every school year, I'd start a new school year in that way. Find a big guy, beat me up, laugh about it, on we went. We were best friends. So I just figured, like, that's weird. People don't just do that. But so with Logan, I knew right away, or at least I felt I did. I had kids later than all my friends by 5 or 6 years. And so I'd witnessed them grow up, and they just seemed like normal babies. They just did baby things. They cried, and they spit up, and they crawled, and they walked, and they played, and they opened gifts, and they hung out with their friends. They did all the normal baby things. My son didn't do any of those baby things. He wouldn't play with other kids. He wouldn't watch cartoons. He waited until the commercials were on when the adults were on, and he got excited. He loved the fucking slap chop. He loved that slap chop and missed the guy, and then when the Grady came out, we actually got him a slap chop and a Grady for his birthday one year.
See
and he
these nuts. Chop these nuts.
Exactly. He was so excited. Like, he was so excited. And still to this day, we talk about the Grady and the slap chop. We'd be watching Dora the Explorer, and he'd be like, "Dora, it's in the backpack." He'd be getting mad at the TV. I'm like, dude, that you're supposed to enjoy the repetition. You're supposed to like it. He did not like it. So I knew there was something was different. And I don't know, what was going through my head was more like, once I started to know what the challenges could look like. And okay, believe me, like, Logan has autism, he has challenges, but he wasn't like I'm going to sit there rocking all day and not say a goddamn word type of challenge. We got it easy from that perspective. There are other kids that had it way harder, other parents that had it way harder, no doubt. But it was a challenge in and of itself. So my first thinking back in those days was like, this guy's going to be with me forever. He's never going to live on his own. He's never going to be able to support himself. He's never going to be able to manage a relationship, any friends, all of that. I'm going to have to help him. And I thought at that time, like, forever. like live with me forever kind of a deal. But over the years, through persistence and therapy, a lot of therapy and a lot of practice, and his own desire to want to manage himself, and while he was years behind, he just did it himself. He just knew he wanted to, like, the air quote normal kind of thing. Like, he wanted to not be normal, but to be able to just be okay with himself. And and who among us is truly okay with themselves? I mean, nobody, I don't think. But he kind of has gotten to this point where he knows who he is. He knows who he wants to be, at least at a theoretical level, maybe not a practical level. Um, and like, I think he's gonna be fine. He's gonna live on his own. He's gonna have relationships. I think he wants kids. He says he does. I think he vacillates, but I think he overall wants kids. But he wants to be self-supporting. He wants to live on his own. He wants to manage his things. He wants to have his buddies. He wants to go out partying with them. He wants to, have sex and make babies, and maybe not immediately. Hopefully, it's expensive. Logan, don't do it. But he wants all these things, and that's great. I couldn't. If I look back to the early days and the current days, I couldn't logically piece those together. I couldn't think of a path that would get us there, but somehow we did. And some of it's my credit, some of it's his mom's credit, probably quite a lot because she knew how to work the system. And most of it is his. He did it himself because he refused to not do it. One of the things he said at university this past term was, I'm not failing. I'm not going down like that without a try, without an effort. If I fail, it'll be for some other reason, but not without effort. And I'm like, shit, yeah. Good for you. Right? Don't give up. I don't know if that's what you asked, but that's what I answered.
No, that is, man. And I think the other thing is that it is a system, and you do have to know how to navigate it. We've talked to people that have some kiddos that, maybe have things. And it's not just like, I'm not talking about autism. Like, I'll give you an example with my daughter. So my youngest daughter, when she was about 5, my wife, who's amazing at navigating the system, to use that term, booked her in, got a really good optometrist just because she had read something about, extensive eye testing and importance of eye health and those kind of things. So got her in there, and we found out that she was farsighted, and pretty severely. Like, if it was beyond, kind of 40 feet, she was almost unable to see it. She could see the color, but certainly couldn't, a road sign would be a good example. Couldn't read the road sign. So the optometrist at the time said, it's actually really great that you guys are being proactive about your child's eye care, health, and there are things that they can do. So we started her on this prescriptive glasses and eyewear, and there was other little things that we did, but we were able to get to it and address it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's tricky when it's a kid because kids can't tell you. She doesn't know that she's got that seeing problem until she does know, right? But sometimes that doesn't happen until they're a little bit older, because when they're born with those eyes, that's the way they think eyes work. And it's the same thing with young kids. When they're born with that mind, that's the way they think that a mind works.
And why doesn't everyone understand me?
100%.
Yep.
So we have this job as parents to, make sure that we're being proactive about our kids' health, because specifically on the mental health side of things, there are so many amazing therapists, counselors, group programs, youth centers that will help develop, because it does, to use the adage, it takes a village, it does take a village. And by getting a diagnosis, if it's something like that, like in Logan's case, now you can navigate. Now at least you have identified and you can pursue. And then kids are so resilient, man. So, like, I guess what I'm saying is, if you've got young kids, just watch for those things. Just pay attention, and then go, do what parents do. Try and find help and try and navigate systems.
Don't be in denial. Don't be my kid doesn't have this, or my kid can't have that. Like, that's not my kid. He just needs to toughen up, or he just needs to do this. Or
I've definitely felt that over the years. Recently, Cam and mostly Cam, but a little bit of Logan, both told me that they have aphantasia. So aphantasia is the inability to imagine something in your mind. So if I say apple, did you picture an apple in your brain? Did you? Yeah. So I also pictured an apple, and there's now an elephant stepping on that apple. You pictured it. Well, Cam doesn't picture it. Somehow In his mind, he just doesn't see this apple or the elephant or any other thing. So when that game of think of a giraffe, and I think of a giraffe, I always think of elephants. That's my defense, so that I can say, no, I legitimately thought of elephants. I didn't think of a giraffe. Cam would just be like blank, blank up there, nothing happening. And Logan says he senses that and feels that to some degree, but I can definitely see with Cam it's stronger. So, you say things like, well, imagine, and then you're like, oh, shit, Cam can't imagine in that fashion. So it's really interesting. I didn't know this. This came out like a year or two ago, maybe. Um, and somehow I didn't know that their whole life that they had this challenge. And it's like the glasses thing. Like they don't know. They don't know if they're colorblind. They don't know if they can't see so well. They don't know if, I don't know. I guess they know if they're like left-handed, but they wouldn't know autism versus whatever, some other tism. So it's really interesting that you can be paying attention to your kids and listening to them, but you're still going to miss something. The things they choose to keep from you, the things that they don't even know about themselves. Like you can't possibly know everything about your kids. It's kind of impossible. But the best thing I think I ever heard was, you're a good dad when you give a shit about whether or not you're a good dad. You may still be an asshole, but at least you're caring about what's going on. At least you're trying. And who among us haven't? We all try to some degree. All the dads that I know that I care to talk to, it seems like they're at least trying. I've definitely known some dads that don't, and some moms too.
You got a new thing that's in development.
So Storyay, the idea came 15 years ago or so when I was hanging out with my son, and I realized kids like getting things in the mail. He went to the mailbox. He got a letter from an uncle and aunt, somebody I don't recall. And man, this kid was jumping up and down like an idiot. He was 4 years old, and he just couldn't believe somebody would send him a piece of mail in the mail. My name's on there, the whole thing. And it dawned on me. Back then I called it Pirate Stories, and the idea was just a 12-part, one letter a month kind of a thing. And at the end of the month, you'd have some sort of culminating activity, 12 puzzle pieces that would lead to a map that would get you some buried treasure, that kind of a thing. Simple idea. I put it to bed because, children, divorce. My oldest has autism. That was a difficult few years. My ex-wife now at the time fell down and landed on her ass and got what basically was cancer in her ass. So that was a big deal for about 2 or 3 years. We just had to deal with that. There was postpartum depression that came with that. A second kid kind of came along. There was just some difficult times, let's say. So I put it to bed because you got to raise your kids, right? You got to work. You got to get up every day, and you got to forget your dreams a little bit.
Just put it in a bubble.
Put it in a bubble. So, and also the technology wasn't there. So many years go by, and the idea came again about a year ago. I started working on it. I built the technology all using Google technology, which is pretty cool and convenient because it's all in one place, to personalize these letters that are going to go to kids. We're going to ask the parents a lot of questions about the kids, what sort of kid they are, what favorite colors, their friend's name, and integrate those responses into the letters themselves. And then over time, as the letters progress throughout the journey over the 6 months, we'll ask more questions, more interesting questions, questions that actually help us really get to know the kid, and then we can work those answers into the stories as we go on. They're all illustrated and written by humans, no AI. So that's a key differentiator, I believe, for us, in that real people are writing these things.
That's awesome.
And drawing them as well. So we're starting with a pretty narrow age range right now. 8 to 12 is kind of where we're starting. And then we're going to spread out to K to 12. And then young adult is for fall of 2026.
Sounds like a great idea.
I hope so. We're going on TV in a couple of weeks, and we're going to do our Kickstarter launch in February. Hopefully from there, we get a lot of traction, a lot of interest. And then from there, in 5 years, we want to be able to build this avatar. That's the plan, is to have kids have visible and invisible disabilities or differences or whatever you want to call them. This is why I don't speak for the company. We have a real live person that does that better than me, because I don't know all the right terminology. But essentially, we're going to have an avatar builder where you can go online and I have friends that her son was born without his left arm. I have another friend who was born without fingers, and he worked with the war amps for a little while, that kind of thing. I want them to be able to go online and pick themselves online, put themselves in a wheelchair, pick that they have autism or ADHD or OCD or whatever it is. And then those stories will really directly be written to these kids and make them feel, I
Empower
don't know,
them.
a little exactly empower and a little more, you know, out there and seen and heard.
That's
So
fantastic.
yeah, that's the long term goal.
Have you seen the prototype? Lance had one.
Yesterday,
Yeah.
yeah, it was showing me.
The cool thing that I like about it is it's such an experience, right? It comes as this box. So it isn't just a letter. It's an adventure, right? There's a box, you open it up, there's the story in there, it's catered to the child. They've got this wonderful way of incorporating it as a literacy tool as well too. So they try and like aim it with the right, where that child should be based on the parents' inputs. It comes up with, what should be the appropriate literacy level, but at the same time trying to encourage them to read more, read better.
And there's a bunch of different activities in it too. Like there's going to be pencils and gifts and stickers and a whole bunch of cool stuff for kids.
Yeah, a lot of cool stuff so that the kid
Yeah.
has something to open. If it's a Christmas gift, it's a little late for Christmas this year, but if it's a birthday gift or a Christmas gift next year, they have something to open. They have something to play with right away. There'll be coloring sheets and word searches and spot the differences, those kinds of activities, age appropriate, in addition to sample letters so that they can read and be able to pick right out of the gate. So that the concept is we want the kids and the parents, because parents need to guide children. We want the parents to be able to choose which letter. So there'll be 3 different age appropriate letters, so younger, middle, and a little older. What story hits them the best? Whether it's the space or the Enchanted Forest or the Fate of the Feline one, which is like a time travel adventure thing. And also, they get to choose whether it's from a boy's or from a girl's perspective. There's stats out there that say that boys at a certain age are 80% more likely to read stories from boys written with a boy protagonist than they are from a girl's perspective. And while, I want to encourage boys to read from any perspective, of course, so that they can learn and grow in their mind. But if they're not going to read at all, I'd rather give them something they will read. And then they get to choose this right at the beginning. So the personalization starts right out of the gate. You get to choose what story, and you get to choose male or female perspective. Then you go online and you answer, 10 or 15 questions that really help that first letter that you're going to receive. Right out of the gate, it starts talking about, if your best friend is Jimmy and you like hot dogs, it'll ask you, does Jimmy like hot dogs too? Do you guys eat hot dogs together? That kind of a thing, so that they can really get a feel of being involved in the story right out of the gate.
That's cool. You're doing something for dads to be able to make that special moment with their kids, and the kids are going to remember that. So that's a cool thing.
Yeah, and the other side is it's meant to be so that that the parents don't have to babysit their kid with a screen device for a half an hour. Maybe the kid will sit there and read these letters by themselves and do the activities, and it's offline, off the screens, and do the coloring page. Now there's a time for the screens as well. They're going to take this coloring page and submit it online and with their parents' help, and in the next letter, that coloring page will appear. It'll look like it was posted on their fridge, and it'll appear in the letter and say, "Hey, thanks for this coloring page. It's really helping me on my journey as I don't know, wander through space or get lost in the forest," that kind of a thing, right? So really, when they open that first letter, the second letter, and they see their name and they see their kids and their friends and their favorite color and their coloring page in there, they're gonna just
It draws them in
really
more.
feel.
Yeah, for sure. Wicked.
Yeah, I'm excited.
I got a few questions we like to ask all of our guests. You ready for some?
Probably not.
You're in
Go
the hot
ahead.
seat now.
In the hot
Hot
seat.
seat.
Great.
Question number 1. Tell us your favorite dad joke.
All right. Why did the chicken cross the playground?
Why did the chicken cross the playground, Lance?
To get to the other slide.
Ooh,
To get to the other side.
nice touch. Nice touch.
So we talked a bit about Glenn, your dad, but it doesn't have to be about him. The question we ask is, what's the best advice you've ever gotten? So that could be from a dad, could be from mom, could be from role model. What's the best advice?
That's a tough one, right? This advice applies to thousands of different scenarios. The best. Sidebar, just real quick. When people ask me my favorite color, I think it's a dumb question. Colors are dependent upon the mood. They're dependent upon what they're used for. I don't have a favorite color. When I was a kid, I had a favorite color. Now, I don't have a favorite color. When they ask me, what's your favorite kind of pizza? Again, stupid question. There's 6,000 kinds of pizzas, and they all depend on the mood. If I want one with thin crust, then thin crust at that time and that moment is maybe my favorite. But so, Your question again was,
What's
what's
your
my
favorite
best
color?
advice? What's my favorite color? My favorite color is pizza.
Yeah.
This is a tell us how you really feel, Lance.
Yeah. Well, I typically do. Uh, it's pretty recent because I definitely have a recency bias in my life in general. I forget things. I black out entire sections of my life because they were bad and I don't remember them. So this is like a defense mechanism that I've done. I really, really appreciate Mr. Carter and his advice about progress before perfection. I've applied it recently to Storyay. I've applied it to my kids' lives, to Logan's life in particular, to Cam's too, my own especially. I started doing demo Fridays. Like Friday, we're doing a demo. And if on Friday nothing happened since last Friday, we should all be mad at ourselves that nothing happened. It doesn't have to be better. It doesn't even have to be progress before perfection, I guess. Sort of dictates it does, but it just has to be that we tried to make it better. So, how about this? Approximate progress before perfection.
Yeah. That's it. Okay, so we talked about favorite color. Pizza. We talked
Pizza.
about favorite pizza.
Blue.
So this is a fun one. This is a section we call Dream Car Garage. You're going to choose 3 vehicles off the cuff.
You know I don't like cars, right?
I know.
Okay.
This is why I'm asking you,
That's
because
great.
you're going to talk about that. piece of shitty
Wiener
V-
car can be an answer. That's totally
Yeah.
fine.
Fantastic.
So 3 cars. You get to choose a daily driver, a winter beater, and a flex. What are you driving?
All right, fine. The daily driver. Well, I do really like my Ioniq 5. If Hyundai's out there and wants to sponsor, shit my dad taught me, feel free, give me a call. I will talk it all up all day long. I really like it. The EV is pretty cool. You step on the pedal and away she goes. There's no like, there's none of that. I don't want to talk about whether or not EVs are better than gas because that's a whole, I don't know, who knows.
We'll have a different episode.
Different one about that. But I love my little golf cart. So that daily sucker, it zips along. It's fast. It's got space. It's convenient. I can't fit more than 4 people in it. So screw you, kids. Get somebody else to drive. I love that for the daily. What was the other one?
The winter beater.
Winter beater. I had a. So I grew up in the country outside of London, Ontario. Country driving. You learn really quickly how to, I don't even know what you call it, drift, brake slide. Most of the time in the winter, you don't use your steering wheel except a touch just to get it going. But then you brake slide around the corners at 60 or 70 kilometers an hour in full snow, back when we had snow in Canada. So I had this AMC Spirit. It had leaf springs, and they were broken. And so the back of the car would bounce up and down, and my friends would bounce their heads off the ceiling. It was a delightful time. I really liked that car. It was so much fun, and it was the first car I ever bought. And if I could bring it back, maybe put a few safety features on it, I think that would be the one.
A roll cage.
A roll cage for sure. Maybe don't let me drive. But those days of like brake sliding around the corners and so much fun. So much fun. I miss that quite a bit.
And although
The
your
flex
first
car?
2 vehicles are clearly flex vehicles, is there one that flexes a little harder? What's the flex car?
Well,
Whatever Chris Card is driving.
yeah. Well, I got to throw it over to Jamie. You get some nice cars. I'm not a car guy. I actually don't much care. But let me think now. Anything with a hot tub. Yeah.
Hot tub time machine car.
Yeah, that would work. Yeah, but I don't have to drive in that scenario. I'm in the back.
And this is why you ask these questions, because
Yeah.
they're not
Nope,
repeated
it's
ever.
Not about the car.
No
It's-
answers are repeated.
Yep. That's the first time somebody said with a hot tub.
Anything with a hot tub.
Yep.
I
Makes
don't
sense.
care. It can be a building with wheels. It's fine.
Makes sense. I also want to take a second at the end and just let you plug. If there's anything we haven't talked about that you want to talk about, the stage is all yours.
Well, I'm quite excited about Storyay, as you mentioned, or as I've mentioned. Like we're pre-revenue, so for all I know, it's going to fall on its ass and do nothing, but I don't think so. I think it's going to be really impactful for kids. At the beginning, it's going to help improve literacy. Kids are struggling. I read another article today about the state of literacy. It's pretty poor. In the long term, though, the ability to really represent themselves in the story. This could take me time. I got to build the software. I've got to make some revenue, make money, make margin. reinvest, which will be the plan for 3 or 4 years. Is just keep reinvesting until I get it to the place where every country that's interested, every language that's interested, every culture that's interested in helping their kids read better, gooder, um, is gonna have that opportunity. I want Storyay to be a word that is, as well known as, let's say, Spotify, because we are just basically a content provider in a new fashion, in a new way. So I'm quite excited about that. Hopefully we don't flop, and I don't think we will because we have our support team, we have our extended support team. We're working within the community to try and to grow and then give back as well, right? So I have these BHAGs, the big, hairy, audacious goals. And one of them is I want to be in the Toronto 2026 Christmas parade. And I want Story to pay for it. And I want it to be a fundraising activity where what we do is collect, and the sponsorship activities that go along with it go back into the community and help grow some of the great things that you guys are doing around here. And I'm hopeful to be a small part of that as well.
Hallmark, Indigo, if you guys want to get in pre-revenue,
Yeah,
give them a
exactly.
shout.
Exactly. We're going to take you down, Indigo. So watch out.
That's
On
all.
that note.
Yeah, on that note. That's all I had, man. Anything else you want to say, Jamie?
No, man, really appreciate you coming in. You dug deep on some really important things. Appreciate you being honest and open about it.
Yeah, well, hopefully it helps some other people to, I don't know, keep the conversation going. That's all I can say.
For sure.
Yeah.
Right
All
on,
man.
man.
Thanks
Take
for
care.
the time.
Thank
Thanks.
you.